Johnny Carson was not merely a host, he was the true godfather of American entertainment. A nod of approval or a wave inviting a guest to stay for the next segment from him could transform an unknown actor into a superstar overnight. Johnny's power blanketed Hollywood, making everyone yearn to set foot in his sanctuary just once. But behind the witty smile and the gentlemanly demeanor on television was a Johnny Carson with inviolable principles. He detested rudeness, despised hypocrisy, and never tolerated those who disrespected the audience. To him, the guest chair was a privilege, not an inherent right. And when a star dared to disregard those rules, the punishment was a permanent ban. Let's open the secret files of The Tonight Show to discover the stories of 8 of Hollywood's most powerful men who were nonetheless barred from The Tonight Show, from arrogant figures like Chevy Chase to troubled legends like Mickey Rooney. What did they do to anger the king? And what heavy price did they pay when the doors of the NBC studio slammed shut in their faces forever? Chevy Chase arrogance that insulted the backstage crew. In the late 1970s, Hollywood seemed to revolve around a single name, Chevy Chase. He was young, tall, handsome, and possessed the sharp, satirical wit that had become the trademark of Saturday Night Live. At that time, Chevy Chase was likened to the golden boy of the entertainment industry, radiating an aura of stardom wherever he went. Audiences loved him. Directors sought him out. And naturally, getting Chevy Chase to sit in the prestigious guest chair of The Tonight Show was something every producer craved. But they did not suspect that the arrogance of this rising star would spark one of the most intense silent confrontations in the show's history. When Chevy Chase entered the NBC studio in Burbank, the atmosphere seemed to change immediately. Typically, guests, no matter how famous, maintained a certain respect for Johnny Carson's territory. But Chevy was different. He walked with the air of a superior, head held high, his eyes glancing past people as if they were invisible. There were backstage rumors that Chevy had behaved very rudely toward the film crew. He shouted at sound technicians, complained about the lighting, and acted condescendingly toward the assistants trying to serve him. For Johnny Carson, a man who came from humble beginnings and always valued the professionalism of his crew, bullying was an unforgivable sin. When the stage lights came on and the theme music played, Chevy Chase walked out to the wild cheers of the audience. He sat down, but instead of the usual humility of a junior before a senior, Chevy brought his massive ego into the conversation. He began with his famous catchphrase, "I'm Chevy Chase, and you're not." That line might have been funny on SNL, but in front of Johnny Carson, it exuded an irritating smugness. The interview did not go as smoothly as it appeared on the surface. Johnny tried to ask questions to get Chevy to share about his work, but Chevy constantly interrupted or answered with shallow, flippant jokes. He tried to dominate the forum, attempting to prove he was smarter than the host. Even worse, Chevy engaged in actions like patting Johnny on the shoulder insolently or putting his feet up on the desk, gestures invading personal space that Johnny absolutely hated. Johnny Carson sat there, tapping the rhythm of his pencil on the desk, a sign that he was losing patience. His eyes, usually twinkling with laughter, turned icy and sharp. He looked through Chevy's glamorous exterior and saw only a hollowness filled with arrogance inside. Johnny Carson was a man of the old generation, where courtesy and respect were paramount. He believed humor must come from intellect and charm, not from lowering others to raise oneself up. The way Chevy Chase behaved that night was not only disrespectful to Johnny, but also a disregard for the audience watching on television. He thought he was too famous to play by anyone's rules. Chevy Chase might have remained a big movie star after that night, but the door to Johnny Carson's cathedral slammed shut in his face. Johnny drew a clear line. Talent can make you famous, but only character will get you respected. Wayne Newton, the threat to take care of Johnny in the dressing room. In the 70s and 80s, Wayne Newton was Mr. Las Vegas, possessing a soaring voice and a flashy performance style. But behind those bright stage lights was a man with sky-high self-esteem and a tough personality forged in the harsh environment of the casinos. It all started with Johnny Carson's famous monologues, with the power of a TV king. Johnny had a habit of turning celebrities into targets for nightly jokes. And for a long period, his favorite target was Wayne Newton. Johnny frequently poked fun at Wayne's somewhat overly groomed appearance, high-pitched voice, and gestures deemed lacking in masculinity. The audience laughed uproariously at those sharp satirical arrows. But they didn't know that in Las Vegas. There was a man clenching his fists so tight his nails dug into his flesh every time he heard his name being made into a joke. Wayne Newton was not someone to swallow humiliation. To him, Johnny's jokes were not just entertainment, but a direct attack on his honor and manhood. Wayne's patience was like a rope being pulled tighter every day. And finally, it snapped. He decided he didn't need an agent or a lawyer to handle this. He would settle it by the rules of the street, face to face. The story of Wayne Newton's surprise visit to the NBC studio in Burbank became a chilling legend in showbiz. That day, Wayne did not come as a guest. He walked through the long corridors of the TV station with a face full of murderous intent, ignoring the weak protests of secretaries and assistants. He walked straight into producer Fred de Cordova's office and issued a cold demand, "I want to see Johnny right now." When the door to Johnny's office opened, the air inside seemed to freeze. Johnny Carson, the most powerful man in American television, was sitting behind his desk, likely smoking and reviewing a script. He looked up and met Wayne Newton's fiery gaze. There were no social handshakes, no fake smiles. Wayne stepped forward, planted both hands on Johnny's desk, closing the distance between them to a suffocating degree. "Johnny," Wayne said in a low but heavy voice, "I didn't come here to argue with you. I came to tell you one thing. If you tell one more joke about me, I won't sue you. I'm going to come find you and knock you out cold." Johnny Carson, though famous for being calm, was stunned by this naked and violent threat. He tried to maintain his composure, asking a probing question. "You mean you're going to hit me?" Wayne Newton didn't flinch, his eyes boring into Johnny like a drill. "No, I didn't say hit you. I said I will drop you, and I promise you that." Amazingly, after that fateful night, jokes about Wayne Newton on The Tonight Show suddenly disappeared completely. Johnny Carson, a smart man and a good judge of character, understood that Wayne wasn't joking. He had hit a real rock. Although Johnny never publicly admitted he was afraid. His silent backing down proved that even the king of television had to be wary when facing the wrath of a man ready to use his fists to protect his honor. Jackie Mason, the finger gesture that destroyed a career. On an autumn evening, October 18, 1964, the studio of The Tonight Show was bathed in bright lights and crisp laughter. On stage, standing under the sole spotlight, was Jackie Mason, a stand-up comedian rising like a kite in the wind. With his distinctive voice and witty Jewish storytelling style, Jackie Mason was expected to be a worthy successor to the comedy throne. That night, he was engrossed in his comedy bits. The audience applauded ceaselessly, and everything seemed perfect for a performance of a lifetime. But no one, including Jackie, suspected that just minutes later, his brilliant career would plummet uncontrollably because of a fateful hand gesture lasting less than a second. The trouble began brewing not from the script content, but from an invisible enemy of live television time. That night, due to an unscheduled speech by President Lyndon B. Johnson, the show's duration was cut short, and everything became chaotic. Johnny Carson, sitting behind the desk in the moderator role, began to feel impatient. He received a signal from the director that time was running out, to remind Jackie Mason, who was flowing on stage. Johnny started signaling with his hands. He held up 2 fingers, meaning 2 minutes left, then waved his hands to attract the attention of the guest who was absorbed in performing. Jackie Mason, a comedian with a massive artistic ego, began to feel annoyed. He realized the audience's eyes were no longer focused on him. but were looking toward Johnny Carson, who was making distracting movements on the other side of the stage. For a stand-up comedian, having the forum stolen is a taboo, even if the person doing it is the king of the show. A feeling of disrespect rose up. Jackie decided to improvise on the spot. He paused his joke, turned to look at Johnny with a scowl but still trying to keep a comedic edge, and started mocking Johnny's fingers. And then, the fateful moment arrived, in the excitement of wanting to retaliate against Johnny's disturbance. Jackie Mason said, "You like playing with fingers, fine. Here's a finger for you, and here's another one for you." Accompanying those words was a lightning-fast hand gesture directed toward Johnny's desk, on the black and white TV screens of millions of American families. That gesture looked exactly like Jackie was giving the middle finger to Johnny Carson's face. A deadly silence enveloped the studio for a split second, before the audience gasped in a mix of shock and confusion. Johnny Carson, the man holding life and death power in his hands, was stunned. His face hardened, his smile vanished completely. He could not believe that a guest, a subordinate, dared to perform such a vulgar and insolent act right on national airwaves, aimed straight at his face. Although Jackie Mason later swore thousands of times that it was just a misunderstanding, that he was just pointing normally and the camera angle harmed him, that explanation was completely meaningless before Johnny's cold fury. Immediately after the show ended, Jackie Mason's fate was sealed. Johnny Carson felt deeply insulted. He considered the act to be ingratitude and supreme unprofessionalism, an unwritten embargo, but one with the weight of 1,000 pounds. Was immediately issued, Jackie Mason was erased from The Tonight Show. The door leading to fame slammed shut ruthlessly for Jackie. From a sought-after rising star, he suddenly became a sinner, shunned by other programs because no one wanted to displease Johnny Carson. Bob Hope, artificial boredom that was fed up to the neck. In the glittering history of The Tonight Show, there is a great paradox that television audiences never realized, but was a persistent obsession for Johnny Carson and the production team. That was the case of Bob Hope, the giant tree of American comedy, respected by the whole world as a living monument. On the surface, the relationship between Johnny and Bob Hope looked like a close friendship between two generations of comedy kings. The studio audience always stood up and applauded warmly whenever Bob walked out with his famous ski jump nose and golf club in hand, but they didn't know that behind that beaming, welcoming smile, Johnny Carson was secretly sighing wearily, bracing himself for the most tiring and fake moments of his career. Bob Hope wasn't a bad person or rude like the other band cases. His sin, in Johnny Carson's eyes, was much more subtle and annoying. He was a soulless machine. By the 1980s, when television had shifted to a natural, intimate conversational style that exploited real emotions, Bob Hope was still stuck in the vaudeville era where everything was an act. Bob didn't come to The Tonight Show to talk. He came to recite. Every time he appeared, Bob Hope didn't come alone. He brought along a massive team of writers and a thick stack of scripts pre-written down to the comma when he sat in the chair. Johnny Carson, who always craved authentic, spontaneous dialogue, would try to open with a casual question, such as, "How is your health these days, Bob?" instead of answering. Bob Hope would completely ignore the question. In his head, there seemed to be only a pre-programmed cassette tape. He would respond with a thoroughly rehearsed joke about the president, traffic, or golf, even if it had nothing to do with what Johnny had just asked. Johnny Carson sat there, feeling like he was talking to a wall that could smile. He threw out a conversational ball, but Bob Hope never caught it to throw back. He simply pulled another ball of his own out of his pocket and played by himself. The disappointment was visible in the depths of Johnny's eyes. He was a master of improvisation, someone who could create laughter from the most random situations. But in front of Bob Hope, all his skills were useless. The interview became two monologues running parallel but never touching. Johnny had to constantly pretend to laugh, pretend to be surprised at stale lines he knew perfectly well Bob had said on 10 other shows before. Johnny's close writer, Andrew Nichols, once revealed a painful truth. Johnny admired Bob Hope, but he absolutely hated interviewing Bob. For Johnny, it wasn't entertainment, it was hard labor. He felt professionally insulted when a guest didn't respect the core essence of a talk show, which is talk. Bob Hope's dullness and formulaic nature were like a vampire draining Johnny's energy. There were nights. After Bob left to the thunderous applause of the audience, Johnny would slump over the desk, his face haggard as if he had just been through an illness. He turned to his partner Ed McMahon and said in a tired voice, "Again, he didn't hear a word I said." Although Bob Hope was never officially banned because his status was too great, he was an untouchable cultural institution. Johnny Carson implemented a silent ban. He minimized inviting Bob Hope as much as possible. If NBC forced him to invite Bob for special event promotions, Johnny would often find a way to take a leave of absence that day and let a guest host take the hit. That was the silent resistance of the king. He refused to turn himself into a puppet that only knew how to nod and laugh along to hollow scripts. The story of Bob Hope and Johnny Carson is sad proof that sometimes respect for a legend is not enough to salvage the suffocation when two completely out-of-sync artistic souls are forced to sit next to each other. Jerry Lewis, the dictatorial ego that wanted to school the TV king. If Bob Hope was a soulless monument that made Johnny Carson tired because of boredom, then Jerry Lewis was a nightmare of a completely different color bitterness and a dictatorial ego. Audiences still remember Jerry as the kid with the rubber face, the high-pitched laugh, and the classic stare-falling routines that shook Hollywood in the 50s. But the man who walked into the Tonight Show studio in later years was no longer that lovable fool. The real-life Jerry Lewis was a complex human being, full of pride and carrying a deep grudge against the world as his old glory gradually faded. When the theme music played and Johnny Carson introduced the King of Comedy, Jerry Lewis walked onto the stage not to make people laugh, but to be worshipped. He wore expensive suits, hair slicked back shiny, and carried the demeanor of a tycoon rather than an entertainer. From the moment he sat in the chair to the right of Johnny's desk, Jerry radiated an oppressive energy that weighed down the entire studio. He didn't look at Johnny as a friend or a peer. His gaze at Johnny contained condescension, as if he were the teacher granting a favor to a poor student. The conversation between the two giants quickly turned into mental torture for Johnny. Jerry Lewis didn't come to join the fun, he came to preach. He cut Johnny off, rambling on about comedic philosophy, about the degradation of the younger generation, and about his own forgotten greatness. Every time Johnny tried to insert a light joke to soothe the tense atmosphere, Jerry would stop, stare at Johnny with a stern, even annoyed face, as if to say, "Please be quiet while I am saying important things." What made Johnny Carson, who was famous for his courtesy, feel most insulted was how Jerry Lewis treated everyone around him. Jerry frequently directed the camera director, scolded technical staff right on air, or complained about the microphone, about the lighting. He turned Johnny's studio into his own private stage, where he was the dictatorial director and everyone else were just clumsy puppets. Johnny sat there, the smile on his lips gradually becoming distorted and forced. He felt stripped of his mastery right in his own home. The peak of discomfort was when Jerry Lewis revealed his bitter resentment. He no longer made the audience laugh. He started mocking them. He criticized the taste of the crowd, complaining about how Hollywood had treated him badly. The negative energy from Jerry spread throughout the auditorium, turning the initial eager laughter into awkward silence. Johnny Carson, who always considered his supreme duty to bring joy to the audience before bedtime, felt pain seeing his show turned into a venting session for a washed-up star. After every time Jerry Lewis left, Johnny often fell into a state of exhaustion. He once confided to close associates that interviewing Jerry Lewis was like having his life force sucked out. Johnny didn't hate Jerry, but he feared that toxic ego. He feared seeing the image of a comedy genius destroying himself with bitterness and arrogance. Gradually, Jerry's appearances on The Tonight Show became visibly sparse. Johnny didn't want to invite a guest whose presence brought only darkness and heaviness. Raymond Burr, the silence that killed the atmosphere. In the 60s and 70s, Raymond Burr was a true giant of American television, in both stature and reputation. He was the embodiment of Perry Mason, the invincible defense attorney who could speak eloquently for hours before the court with razor-sharp arguments to save his clients. The audience worshipped him, believing that the man behind that character must surely possess a superior intellect and mesmerizing speaking ability. Therefore, when the name Raymond Burr appeared on the guest list, public expectation was pushed sky high. But tragically, the distance between film and real life is sometimes an abyss. When Raymond Burr stepped onto the stage, he still retained the majestic, taciturn look of Perry Mason. But alas, he had left that lawyer's mouth at home. As soon as he sat down, a heavy atmosphere enveloped the space. Raymond didn't smile. His eyes stared at Johnny Carson with indifference, as if he were sitting in a dentist's waiting room, not on national television. Johnny Carson, with the instinct of a seasoned host, began throwing out open-ended questions to spark a story. He asked about thrilling cases in movies, about interesting backstage stories, or about Raymond's famous hobby of growing orchids. But responding to Johnny's enthusiasm were answers so curt they were painful. Yes, no, or worse, silent nods. Raymond Burr seemed to suffer from an allergy to communication. He had no intention of sharing, no need to entertain anyone, and didn't even bother to feign interest in the conversation. For a talk show, dead air is the most terrifying enemy, and Raymond Burr was the creator of those deadly silences. Johnny Carson began to sweat bullets quite literally. The audience could clearly see the panic skillfully hidden behind his forced smile. Johnny constantly shifted in his chair, tapping his pencil urgently on the desk, a classic SOS signal he sent to the band and director. He tried to crack jokes, made fun of himself, even did silly actions, just hoping to get some reaction from the guest. But Raymond Burr still sat there, solid and silent as a rock. Raymond Burr's dullness didn't just tire Johnny out, it killed the rhythm of the entire show. The studio audience started fidgeting, coughing sounds rang out clearly in the awkward silence. Johnny felt like he was dragging a broken truck up a hill all by himself. He realized that it was better to face an aggressive person than to talk to someone with no vitality. Raymond's boredom was an insult to Johnny's profession, who always believed an artist's duty was to dedicate energy to the audience. After the interview segment ended, a period Johnny felt lasted a century. He swore to himself never to let history repeat itself. Raymond Burr was a great actor, no one denied that, but he did not belong in the world of late-night conversation. Johnny Carson learned a painful lesson on screen. Silence might be gold, a seductive mystery, but in the hot seat of The Tonight Show, silence is not allowed to appear. Mickey Rooney, the out-of-control, drunken spectacle causing chaos. In the glamorous but cruel world of Hollywood, there is an unwritten rule. Nothing is more heartbreaking than witnessing a monument collapse right before your eyes. And for Johnny Carson, a man who spent his life honoring outstanding talents. The case of Mickey Rooney was an indescribable heartache, a bitter mixture of respect and humiliating disappointment. Mickey Rooney was not a stranger. He was America's darling, the innocent boy Andy Hardy, who grew up with an entire generation of viewers. He was a living legend with natural talent who could sing, dance, act, and command a stage with just a wink. But upon entering his twilight years, that little giant brought to the Tonight Show studio an uninvited companion, the demon of alcohol. Every time Mickey Rooney's name appeared on the schedule board, the atmosphere in the production room became tense. Everyone held their breath waiting, wondering which Mickey will we get today, Genius Mickey or Drunken Mickey. And on one fateful night, that fear became a naked reality on national television. Mickey walked onto the stage not with the agile, flexible steps usually seen, but with a tottering, unbalanced appearance. He waved to the audience, but the smile on his lips was distorted and his eyes were glazed, bloodshot, lacking their inherent intelligent spark. When Mickey plopped down into the guest chair, the pungent smell of alcohol seemed to radiate, invading Johnny Carson's personal space. Johnny, with the sensitive nose of a professional host, realized the situation immediately. He frowned slightly, a very small gesture, but enough to signal the crew that a storm at Iyaha was coming. Johnny tried to save face for his senior by starting the story gently, hoping Mickey would sober up through professional inertia. But alas, alcohol had stolen Mickey's control. Instead of answering questions, Mickey Rooney began to ramble. He stammered, words sticking together forming meaningless sentences. He suddenly stood up, danced wildly, then sat down again and began whining about ex-wives, about expensive divorces, and about the ungratefulness of Hollywood. Those weren't witty jokes, they were bitter complaints of a man dissatisfied with life. The studio audience laughed, but it was forced, awkward laughter. They laughed because they didn't know how to react to the sight of a legend making a fool of himself. Johnny Carson sat there, hands clasped tightly on the desk, his face shifting from worry to pity, and finally to the coldness of a moderator forced to protect his show. He couldn't let Mickey continue to be a clown. He tried to cut off Mickey's chaotic train of thought, but Mickey, in his drunkenness, became aggressive and domineering. He leaned over, slapped Johnny's hand hard, and even leaned his face close to Johnny's to say things no one understood. Johnny Carson's patience hit rock bottom. He realized that letting Mickey continue to appear on air in this condition wasn't helping, but was aiding the destruction of a legend's image. Johnny skillfully signaled the band to play louder to drown out Mickey's slurred words, and quickly cut to commercial earlier than expected. During that short break, no one knows what Johnny said to Mickey, but when they returned, Mickey was quieter, shrinking into the large chair, looking pitifully small and lonely. After that night, the frequency of Mickey Rooney's appearances on The Tonight Show dropped significantly. Johnny Carson still loved Mickey, still respected his glorious past. But Johnny could not accept the unprofessionalism and loss of control brought by alcohol. For Johnny, the stage was a sanctuary, and stepping onto it in a non-sober state was blasphemy. The story of Mickey Rooney is a sad low note in the symphony of The Tonight Show, reminding everyone that the aura of the past is not enough to cover the devastation of the present, and sometimes the cruelest act of a host, banning a legend from the airwaves, is the only way to protect the last remaining dignity of that artist. Frank Sinatra, the uncompromising underground war with the boss. Frank Sinatra in the 70s was not just a singer, he was the chairman of the board of all Hollywood. Wherever he went, rules were established there. Frank had powerful friends in the underworld, the temper of a bad boy, and a habit of demanding absolute obedience from those around him. But unluckily for Frank, Johnny Carson was not someone who knew how to submit. The conflict between them didn't explode from a loud argument in the dressing room, but it smoldered from Johnny's nightly monologues. Johnny Carson had an immutable principle on the stage of The Tonight Show. No one is untouchable. He teased the president, mocked the royal family, and naturally, he didn't spare Frank Sinatra. Johnny frequently launched jokes full of innuendo about Frank's shady relationships with the mafia, about his womanizing ways, or about the aggressive personality of the My Way singer. The audience laughed uproariously, but in some lavish mansion in Palm Springs, Frank Sinatra was grinding his teeth in front of the TV screen. For Frank, those jokes were an insult to his honor. He was used to being treated like a king, where everyone had to laugh when he laughed and be silent when he spoke. Being made a laughingstock for the public by a host guy was unacceptable. There were chilling rumors that Frank once sent people to deliver underground messages to Johnny, demanding he curb his mouth if he didn't want trouble. Anyone else in Hollywood might have been scared and backed down, but not Johnny Carson. He responded to that threat with his strongest weapon ignoring it and continuing to joke. The peak of tension occurred during the rare times Frank Sinatra deigned to appear on The Tonight Show. The studio atmosphere then was no longer the usual relaxation, but thick with the smell of gunpowder from a battle of wits. Frank walked out with a condescending demeanor, his cold blue eyes sweeping over the audience as if wanting to impose authority. When sitting down, he didn't look at Johnny as a friend, but as a rival to be wary of. Frank answered questions briefly, sometimes inserting hidden sarcastic remarks to put Johnny in his place right on air. He tried to turn the interview into his own stage, where Johnny was just background noise. But Johnny Carson didn't tense up to argue with Frank. He used courtesy, a calm smile, and intelligent questions to neutralize the opponent's aggression. When Frank deliberately tried to appear dangerous, Johnny would gently steer the story in a humorous direction, making Frank's tension look ridiculous in the eyes of the audience. Johnny showed that, at this desk, he was the host, and he would not let anyone, even the great Frank Sinatra, bully him. After those spark-flying clashes, the relationship between them gradually became cold to the point of freezing. Johnny Carson realized that the price to pay to invite Frank Sinatra was too high. He didn't want to yield, didn't want to censor his joke scripts just to please a star. Johnny Carson would rather keep his show fun and free than bow to the power of the boss. Johnny Carson has long departed from the spotlight, taking a golden era of American television with him to the other side. But the blacklist he left behind is not just idle gossip about personal feuds. It is a costly lesson in professional ethics and how to be a person. Johnny used his supreme power not to bully, but to protect the dignity of the artistic sanctuary. He sent out a steel-hard message that talent can take you to the top, but only character and respect will keep you there for the long haul. In your opinion, among the 8 figures mentioned above, who most deserve to be punished by Johnny Carson? And is there anyone you feel sorry for? Leave your opinions in the comments section so we can discuss. If you find this video interesting, don't forget to hit like, share for friends to watch, and click the subscribe button right now so you don't miss the next shocking backstage secrets of Hollywood.